You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do. You're glib. You don't even know what Ritalin is.
Hi everyone, Aaron here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go back and take a look at Tom Cruise's famous interview with Matt Lauer. This was back in 2005 when Tom was doing a media blitz to promote War of the Worlds. It was during this media blitz that Tom Cruise would assume his final and ultimate form as Tom Cruise, super Scientologist, and Scientology poster boy. Tom Cruise's behavior during his 2005 media blitz wasn't only unusual for Tom Cruise, it was unusual for any Scientologist celebrity. The interview with Matt Lauer was the third of 3 media events that occurred in a 4-week period where Tom showed increasingly erratic behavior. The first event is when Tom jumped on Oprah's couch on May 23rd. This is the first time the public started noticing there is something definitely not right with this guy. The second event was 2 weeks later on June 8th when Tom lost his cool with a journalist interviewing him for 60 Minutes Australia. And the third event was another 2 weeks later on June 24th when Tom sat down with Matt Lauer for the Today Show. So let's break this one down and I will help explain a lot of the Scientology craziness that's littered throughout this interview. And before we get started, let me just thank the sponsor of today's video, Dream Realty, which is me. If you're looking to buy or sell any home or property in the Tampa Bay area and you would like to work with me, just message me at aaron@dreamrealty.com. Now let's jump into it. I'm popping in my AirPod and here we go.
Anything at all interesting happening in your life these days?
Yeah, you know, same old, same old.
Same old you know what?
Same old you know what.
How are you handling this? I mean...
So remember, this is after he jumped on Oprah's couch. I really think that's what he's referring to. I mean, yes, Tom was doing a whole media blitz, but it was pretty much just business as normal until he jumped on the couch.
Every magazine, every newspaper, every entertainment show. What's it like for you to be living through this right now?
I have to tell you, it's just a great time in my life. I'm really happy. I'm engaged, I'm going to be married, and I can't restrain myself, you know.
It's like you have 2 little cords on your cheeks and your teeth just keep showing. Which is great. Congratulations. I was thinking about it.
Is this interview even more cringy after everything we now know about Matt Lauer? I think so.
How many actors, 20-something years into a career, can generate this kind of interest still?
You know, I just do what I do. I love making movies, and I feel privileged to be able to do that.
I'll fast forward through the more mundane stuff.
Let's talk about selling this movie. So you've just toured basically around the world, getting the story of War of the Worlds out there. Is there any fear in your part that what happens personally overshadows the movie?
No, it never does.
You are being so much more open. You've been on this show in the past at times where you were in other relationships, and I'd kind of broach the subject of a personal life, and you would very gingerly steer it away. That was how we came to know Tom Cruise. And now you're saying, you know what? I'm okay with it. So it is it does seem like a different guy.
Yeah, but...
So definitely. So Tom Cruise's publicist used to be Pat Kingsley, who in the industry, my understanding is that Pat Kingsley was the most well-known, well-respected, and powerful publicist in showbiz. And it is under her direction that Tom maintained such a private life. This change, this drastic change in behavior that we saw from him in 2005 coincided with him firing Pat Kingsley as his publicist and hiring his sister, Leanne. There can be absolutely no question that that was at the urging of David Miscavige. Miscavige was wanting Tom Cruise to be more public about Scientology. Pat was telling him over my dead body, and Miscavige said, then fire her. You're Tom Cruise. You don't take orders from Pat Kingsley. Miscavige's meddling in Tom's life is without question behind this drastic change in behavior and in his MO for dealing with the press in general.
It's still, they're still writing it. You gotta understand, all that stuff was, they'd still write it. They'd still talk about it. And the thing is that I still feel that I always feel I will talk about what I feel, what I want to talk about.
Right.
And I won't talk about what I don't want to talk about. And it just doesn't matter. It comes down to the movie, you know? And I also feel, look, Matt, I'm living my life. And I feel, man, I feel fortunate, you know? I feel really fortunate, and I'm excited.
I can't help but feel sorry for Katie Holmes just watching this. I mean, knowing everything that happened since this point, but you know, here you have an actress who in her own right is a very famous, well-known actress with a career and career ambition, and all she's doing is sitting in the wings as Tom Cruise's girlfriend. Like, I really feel bad for her.
You just said something that made me think about something, and if you get out there and talk about it, it kind of takes away a lot of their power to make stuff up, doesn't it? Because you're telling the real story. Where does it leave them to go?
Yeah, but here's the point. I don't even get into that game. I'm just living my life, man. I like hearing good news, you know? I like hearing, you know, if something good happens to you, it's nice. I like sitting here talking to you. I mean, before when we were, you know, it's
Getting a little weird.
I like hearing good news from people, and it's something that I'm happy.
So if you like hearing it, you must want to share it, too.
Yeah, and you know what? And I think
Like, Matt actually had to bring Tom back around to, what the hell are you talking about? We were just talking about your career. You're talking about hearing good news? What the hell are you talking about, man?
Hear the cynics, Mr. Cruise, and you've heard them, who say this is publicity for a movie, this relationship. Or this is Tom Cruise in his 40s trying to become or stay relevant for a younger audience. And that's why he's out there talking about this relationship with this
I believe Tom was 42 years old in 2005.
lovely young lady who happens to be sitting right over there. How do you respond to that?
You know what? There's always cynics. There's always has been, there always will be.
Do you laugh about it or just bug you?
No, you gotta just, I have never worried, Matt, about what other people think and what other people say.
Katie, close your ears for a second, okay? You have said that Katie is the real thing. She is sensational. She's magnificent. Can you explain to me what she's brought to your life that hasn't been brought to your life in the past?
You know, I don't want to compare things. I just say,
I don't mean that.
No, because, you know, but what it is, it's that thing where you just, in life, when it just happens, man. You know, it's just, you meet someone.
It just happens when your best buddy David Miscavige uses all of the resources at his disposal in the Church of Scientology to interview girlfriends for you, set up bullshit auditions at the Celebrity Center for roles in various Tom Cruise projects so they can find girls for Tom Cruise to date. That's how it just happens.
And I can't even describe it.
Katie has mentioned that she is embracing, or at least exposing herself and opening herself up to Scientology. At this stage in your life, could you be with someone who doesn't have an interest?
Good question.
Scientology is something that you don't understand. It's like...
And he's not going to answer it.
You could be a Christian and be a Scientologist, okay? Scientology is something...
So it doesn't replace religion.
And it is a religion because it's dealing with
This is a perfect example of how it would be really nice if journalists actually understood a bit more about Scientology so that they can push back on instances where Scientologist celebrities lie about Scientology like Tom is doing right here. Now, I know to a degree, you know, entertainment journalists, you know, we're not exactly talking about investigative journalists, but it sure would be nice. It sure would be nice if people were able to push back on really the over-the-top claims, like you can be a Christian and be a Scientologist. Like, we need some entertainment journalists out there who can call bullshit on that in real time in interviews and not be afraid of losing future stories or something like that.
With the spirit, you know, you as a spiritual being. And it's something that there's tools that you have that that you apply to your life.
Coming up, the mood changes a bit. You're going to see a fiery Tom Cruise talk about his attack on Brooke Shields, antidepressants, and Ritalin for kids.
I've never agreed with psychiatry, ever. Before I was a Scientologist, I never agreed with psychiatry. And then when I started studying the history of psychiatry, I started realizing more and more why I didn't agree with psychiatry. And as far as the Brooke Shields thing is, look, you gotta understand, I really care about Brooke Shields. I think here's a wonderful and talented woman. And I want to see her do well. And I know that psychiatry is a pseudoscience.
But Tom, if she said that this particular thing helped her feel better, whether it was the antidepressant or going to a counselor or a psychiatrist, isn't that enough?
Matt, you have to understand this. Here we are today, where I talk out against drugs and psychiatric abuses of electric shocking people, okay, against their will, of drugging children with them not knowing the effects of these drugs. Do you know what Adderall is? Do you know Ritalin? Do you know now that Ritalin is a street drug? Do you understand that?
The difference is,
No,
this was
no,
not
Matt,
against
Matt,
her
I'm
will,
ask-
though.
Matt, I'm
But this
ask-
wasn't
Matt, I'm
against
asking you a
Brooke's will.
question. Matt, I'm asking you a question.
I understand there's abuse of all of these things.
No, you see, here's the problem. You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do.
Aren't
Famous words from Tom Cruise. I promise you, Tom Cruise has not sat down and read some history book on the subject of psychiatry beyond anything that's actually written in the works of Scientology itself. And keep in mind that L. Ron Hubbard's view on psychiatry is that it originated on the planet Farsec. And Scientology holds that all beings are basically good, but L. Ron Hubbard actually makes an exception for the beings that came from the planet Farsec, that is, the beings who then later came to this planet to introduce psychiatry as a subject to the population of this planet as part of a grand master alien plan to control the civilization of this planet. So when Tom says, I understand the history of psychiatry and you don't, this is very much part of what he's talking about. This is also why Tom is completely unwilling to acknowledge that there has ever been an instance where someone has benefited from the use of a psychotropic medication, or from seeing a psychiatrist, or from seeing a psychologist. Because to Tom, the evidence does not matter. Any anecdotal evidence or empirical evidence, none of this matters, because the presence or lack of that type of evidence is not what has caused Tom Cruise to hold the beliefs about psychiatry that he holds. So providing him with any or more of such evidence isn't going to change his beliefs. His beliefs come from what he has learned about psychiatry from Scientology.
All it does is mask the problem, Matt. And if you understand the history of it, it masks the problem. That's what it does. That's all it does. You're not getting to the reason why. There is no such thing as a chemical imbalance.
So
in a body.
postpartum depression to you is
Matt,
kind of a little psychological gobbledygook?
No, I did not say that.
I'm just asking, what would you call it?
Matt, that is the post. Now you're talking about two different things.
But that's what she went on the antidepressant for.
But what happens, the antidepressant, all it does is mask the problem. There's ways of vitamins and through exercise and various things. I'm not saying that that isn't real. That's not what I'm saying. That's an alteration of what I'm saying. I'm saying that drugs aren't the answer, that these drugs are very dangerous. They're mind-altering, antipsychotic drugs. And there are ways of doing it without that, so that we don't end up in a brave new world. The thing that I'm saying about Brooke is that there's
So here's what's interesting, is that obviously there are parts of what Tom is saying that are true in various ways and in various scenarios. It is true that children abuse a lot of these drugs and they get turned into street drugs. That is true. There's probably a strong argument to be made that there is definitely an over-diagnosis and over-medication of behaviors that, you know, back in my childhood and previous, would just be considered being a child. There's valid arguments to be made on that subject, and yet the thing is, even though Tom's making those arguments, and even though there is, room for spirited debate on those subjects, it is not fundamentally at the core of Tom's objection to psychiatry. There is no room for him to ever concede or acknowledge that anybody has been or could be or ever will be helped by psychiatric medication or psychiatric care, because Scientology is telling him that psychiatry is part of the evil alien plot to control civilization on this planet. So he's making arguments that in certain areas and in certain ways could be sound, but the fundamental basis for his argument is anything but sound.
Misinformation, okay? And she doesn't understand the history of psychiatry. She doesn't understand in the same way that you don't understand it, man.
But a little bit what you're saying, Tom, is you say you want people to do well, but you want them to do well by taking the road that you approve of, as opposed to a road that may work for them.
No. Good question.
No, I'm not.
Well, if antidepressants work for Brooke Shields, why isn't that okay?
I disagree with it.
Strong question.
And I think that there's a higher and better quality of life. And I think that promoting, for me personally, see, you're saying, what, I can't discuss what I want to discuss?
No, you absolutely
I know,
can.
But Matt, you're going in and saying
I actually forgot that there was a part of this interview where Matt's actually doing a decent job.
that I can't discuss that.
I'm only asking, isn't there a possibility that, do you examine the possibility that these things do work for some people? That yes, there are abuses.
See,
and yes, maybe they've
it.
gone too far in certain areas. Maybe there are too many kids on Ritalin. Maybe electric shock.
Too many kids on Ritalin, Matt.
I'm just saying, but aren't there
Matt,
examples where it
Matt,
works?
Matt, you don't even, you're glib. You don't even know what Ritalin is. If you start talking about chemical imbalance, you have to evaluate and
All right, I gotta comment on the glib thing. Glib is a popular word in Scientology. Even to a Scientologist, Tom's use of this word is very strange here. In Scientology, glib refers to the ability to study something, do very well on a test. In other words, you can study the information, you can remember the information, you can regurgitate the information on a test, but you have a complete inability to apply the information in real life. In Scientology, calling someone glib is an insult, but not in the way that Tom's using it. Even to a Scientologist, what Tom is saying in this interview is just fucking weird.
read the research papers on how they came up with these theories, Matt. Okay? That's what I've done. And you go and you say, where's the medical test? Where's the blood test that says how much Ritalin you're supposed to get?
It's very impressive to listen to you because clearly you've done the homework and you know the subject.
And you should. And you should do that also.
So this is the point where Matt caves and ceases to do a good job as a journalist. Tom does raise a question there that I myself have always had and have never seen a good answer to. If the premise for a lot of these medications is that they are correcting a chemical imbalance, how is it that these conditions can be diagnosed and medications can be prescribed without some sort of a blood test, some sort of test to even measure the level of the chemicals that they're supposed to be an imbalance of? I have never seen a good answer to this question, and I'm not saying I've only seen bad answers. I'm actually not sure I've ever seen any answers. So for any of you watching, if this happens to be an area of expertise for you, please jump in the comments down below.
So because just knowing people who are on Ritalin isn't enough. You should be a little bit more responsible in knowing
I'm
really...
not prescribing Ritalin, Tom, and I'm not asking anyone else to do it.
You're saying no,
I know some people who seem to have been helped by it.
But it's like, this is a very important issue.
This is a very,
and you know what, and you're here on the Today Show.
Right.
And to talk about it in a way of saying, well, isn't it okay, and being reasonable about it when you don't know, and I do. I think that you should be a little bit more responsible in knowing what it is, because you communicate to people.
But you're now telling me that you...
So we do see here, I mean, this is a complete shift in behavior from anything we had ever seen from Tom Cruise before this. And remember, this was shortly after Tom doing an interview with 60 Minutes Australia, where he also took this really lecturing, speaking down as if he's a parent speaking to a child. I mean, the idea of approaching a journalist on a major media platform like this would have been completely unheard of prior to 2005. Remember, I mean, this is what he did with Peter Overton.
You're stepping over line, you know you are. I'm just telling you right now, put your manners back in.
And then just 2 weeks later, taking the exact same tone with Matt Lauer, it's really something.
Your experiences with the people I know, which are zero, are more important than my experiences.
What do you mean by that?
You're telling me what's worked for people I know or hasn't worked for people I know, and I'm telling you I've lived with these people, and they're better.
So you're advocating it?
I am not. I'm telling you, in their case, in their individual case.
Look, he's trying to call Matt out for not being honest about advocating it, but he himself is not being honest about what he's actually saying. He's saying no one should ever, under any circumstances, use any of these drugs or get any therapy, and yet he's denying that that's actually what he's doing.
It worked. I am not going to go out and say, get your kids on Ritalin, it's the cure-all and the end-all.
Matt, but here's the point. What is an ideal scene in life? Okay? Ideal scene is someone not having to take antipsychotic drugs.
Ideal scene is a Scientology word. It's a very popular word in Scientology. Scientologists are always in various areas of their life constantly working towards achieving the ideal scene. Ideal is a big buzzword in Scientology. Anyway, I won't get into all that.
I would agree.
Okay, so now you look at and you go, okay, a departure from that ideal scene is someone taking drugs. Okay, and then you go, okay, what is the theory and the science behind that justifies that?
Let me take this more general, because I think you and I could go around in circles on this for a while, and I respect your opinion on it. Do you want more people to understand Scientology? Would that be a goal of yours?
You know what, absolutely, of course. You know,
how do you go about that?
You just communicate about it, and the important thing is, like, you and I talk about it, whether it's, look, if I want to know something, I go and find out, because I don't talk about things that I don't understand. I'll say, you know what, I'm not so sure about that. I'll go find more information about it so I can.
But here's the thing. There is no one on planet Earth, regardless of how much experience and expertise they have in the field of psychiatry, psychology, or any of these psychotropic medications. There is no one on planet Earth that Tom Cruise would concede does know the truth, as long as they don't agree with Tom. Tom's definition of knowing the truth is agreeing with Tom, agreeing with Scientology, agreeing with L. Ron Hubbard. It sets up this fallacy where the definition of the truth is what Tom already believes.
Come to an opinion based on the information that I have.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize it ended right there. Okay. It was only about 8 months before Tom did this entire media blitz. It was only about 8 months prior to all that David Miscavige, head of the Church of Scientology, Tom Cruise's best friend, awarded Tom a medal, a Scientology award that had never been awarded to anyone else prior and has never been awarded to anyone else since, and that is the IAS Freedom Medal of Valor. There's something called the IAS Freedom Medal, and that is awarded to a handful of Scientologists every year who are seen to be doing more than anyone else to forward the aims of Scientology. But there was never anything known as the Freedom Medal of Valor. It didn't exist. David Miscavige made it up just to give it to Tom. It's bigger than your normal IAS Freedom Medal. It has diamonds in it, which your normal IAS Freedom Medal does not. And even this has become a pretty funny meme because the medal is big, Tom is very small. And the whole ceremony where Tom was awarded this medal was very cringy. The bromance between Miscavige and Cruise, that was probably the first time that bromance publicly came to view. They had this real awkward salute kind of thing. And Tom Cruise's reputation has never really been the same since all of this. It doesn't seem to have hurt his bankability or his box office success, but now we're in an age where if someone says, you know, he's not just crazy, he's Tom Cruise crazy, everyone knows exactly what that means. Prior to 2005, something like that would have been completely unthinkable. All right, well, that's all I have for now. Thank you to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here.